the pecan part, it would be purple.
In this area, I know.
We'll call it a color for lack of anything. There's a big round concrete tube.
My stepmom actually
And it's round.
barrel races.
So what you can take
Yeah.
to go in there and just tie where the water flow comes and run those things. That way you can contain
Beautiful.
And
and
yes,
it's
it's
down there, and
systemic
it's
too.
soft.
those sinkholes being started. So we'll see.
See, how old is that, center? Like last year, it didn't rain a whole lot. So is the rainwater sufficient enough to be causing the erosion? Because last
So
year,
did you
we had
survive
big droughts.
stock show and all the
Well,
other
they
fun
did
stuff?
their assessment, I didn't bring it with me because this
Was
is
it
the
busy
wrong
time?
form for it, but they did their assessment and they talked about
My niece
the
showed
100-year
Floresville,
flood,
and she just got back from Fort Worth, and she's in San
rains.
Antonio.
You get a lot of water because of all the concrete out there between the.
How we doing? All right, what's news?
One of their proposals was put, cut the concrete out and put little bean belts. So like having, some mini French fries through there to maybe catch it. They're looking at,
It's 1 o'clock. Let's go ahead and
We're going.
okay, it's 1 o'clock, it's Monday, the 11th of February, 2013. I'd like to call this meeting of City of Floresville Audit Committee to order. Councilwoman Castillo, would you start us with an invocation, please?
Can I understand? Our Heavenly Father, thank you so much for bringing us together on this beautiful day. We ask that you guide us in our leadership and give us the necessary knowledge and give us the necessary information to be able to make wise decisions. We thank you for all of what we have that you've given us, all of our blessings. Thank you again, Lord. We ask in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
We have a quorum. The entire committee is present with Jim Miller, Chairman, Councilwoman Castillo, Councilman Rodriguez, Ms. Deborah Conley, Mr. Douglas Johns, City Manager Andy Jocelyn, Laura Fagan, the ad hoc member, is not present. Also present is Councilman John Barrera. Say the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Under the Texas flag, I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Put that up there.
It needs to be a little bit bigger.
Yeah, they're starting to do it at all the committees, so when they meet here, they put it up there. Because I have the copies in the regular council chambers, but not in the house.
I'd also like to go ahead and make note of the mayor who's joined us. The agenda is on do we have any citizens present? The agenda is discussion and possible action, A, insolvency plan. And just as a procedural issue, I handed out a summary of Robert's Rules of Order. Primary importance when somebody does have the floor, unless there is a procedural issue, please don't interrupt somebody while they're speaking. And be it a point of order or a point of procedure. If it's not specifically related to the functions of this committee, we'll save it to any comments at the end under what Robert's Rules of Order refers to good and welfare. As to the responsibilities of this committee, the audit committee shall, and I'm quoting from the city charter, receive the report of the internal auditor and present that report to the city council with any recommendations from that committee. In the document that I handed out, there were several points noted in the January 18th report from Pat Wagner. I asked the city manager for the city staff's recommendations. You all should have received that package. Specifically as it related to monitoring the general fund cash deficit, the debt service payment, the possibility of a going concern being cited on the audit, and lastly, as it related to utility rates. The first item that I think we need to focus our recommendations on, and probably the most important item as it relates to this, was the issue of monitoring. In the document that I handed out to you, I quoted what the auditor said in her January 18th report, and she noted that it was a continuation of a previous finding, and that previous finding was 2011-3. I think the basis of this is the first sentence in that finding, and we go back to that annual financial report of September 13th. In finding 2011-3, the auditor reports city management and those charged with governance should monitor the city's financial position and how actual operations are comparing to budget. We see that in some of the financial reports going on, but clearly this was what led to the deficit, whether it be legal fees or professional fees or any other item that was spent beyond what was budgeted. That reporting or action by city management and those charged with governance did not occur. As a result, it is my opinion that our focus should be in recommendations and how do we address that process. I know there are several things in place that have changed since this audit. I know the city manager's job description included some additional responsibilities as far as monthly financial reporting and quarterly budget adjustments. But if you continue on in her 2011 report, under that issue of monitoring, which is the second bullet there, and the very first sentence, it says accounting processes, especially journal entries, bank deposits, and disbursements, should also be subject to monitoring through a review and approval process, i.e. a second set of eyes. The third bullet, I think the city has already addressed issues of training and default accounts, etc. Based on these findings, city staff, and I'm summarizing, their recommendations were to limit authorized personnel to seek services from legal and professional representatives, that all requests should have prior approval from the office of the city manager and the office of the mayor, to seek requests for qualifications, requests for proposals for both services, meaning legal and professional fees, or create staff positions within budgeted amounts. Limit the use of both services, both legal and professional, to ensure funds are available for the entire fiscal year. Adequately charge for services rendered in the permits department. And lastly, be transparent in total city operations in an effort to minimize discourse within the community. With that, I'll open the floor to discussion.
I think that first bullet point, limit the authorized personnel who seek services from legal and professional representatives. I believe we already have an ordinance in place. I don't have it to limit, to monitor legal expenses. I'm not sure about the professional, so we would have to go back and look at that ordinance and see what it says, because it does limit the number of people who should be calling the attorney, the city attorney.
I do have a copy of that if y'all like, I can.
Well, that's the resolution that the council had passed. I'm familiar with that.
Well, I was going to see a copy of it, if you don't mind.
Can you, based on your statement on this staff recommendations. You state that it has become apparent during the staff's task that too many individuals affiliated with the city are seeking legal advice from the city attorney's office without prior approval, which in turn results in additional costs. Then you attach the total legal fees charged by the city attorney. Can you tell me how many of these fees, or what dollar amount of these fees was the result of, other than the office of the mayor or other than the office of the city manager requesting legal services?
We've got areas, it was brought to my attention by the P&Z board, that they wanted to know why their portion of planning and zoning was so high, and the development also, that, I think that their understanding was minimal, that every time they would call the city attorney to get some kind of advice or guidance, that this was being charged. So they wanted a breakdown, you know, why is it so much? Well, they have to understand how much the hourly rate is, and then that every time that they do call, it's a charge. So that was one of the areas that came to mind specifically. So,
Okay, well, that's only $43,400 of this. And I'm gonna come back to my original piece, although the city's recommendations may be, and let me jump a little further into what Andy said in his recommendations. Said a well-rounded plan to correct liabilities exceeding assets, okay, is where we need to go. When we talk about monitoring, I think what we are discussing, and let me see if I can draw this with an analogy. If we budget $100,000 for legal fees, or let me take something a little bit more obvious. If we go to the last financial report that was given to the council, and we start to look at the percentages of what was spent compared to what was budgeted. And when we look at the Civic and Event Center, for legal fees for this fiscal year, budgeted was $0. For professional fees and entertainers, budgeted was $0. But we have spent this year $40,763.57. That $40,000 is gonna come from someplace, okay? And where are we gonna take that $40,000 from in this budget process? And when the auditor was referring to excessive legal and professional fees, these were unbudgeted amounts that weren't offset with other expenditures or other revenues. What process can we recommend to the city council to prevent this kind of thing from biting the city at the end of the year? Okay, we've talked about multi-year budgeting and that sort of thing. It's my thought that wrong, right, or indifferent, this is just my thought, and it's certainly up for discussion, that if we take the comment of the auditor and a second set of eyes, and actually even the recommendation of Mr. Jocelyn's attorney from the last city council meeting, would be the creation of a finance/budget committee that is not city council members and not city staff, that would look at the financials of the city, i.e. these type of things, take the recommendations of city staff, and then make recommendations to council. And this same committee would be monitoring, hey, you spent $40,000 under legal and professional fees and entertainer fees out of the event center that wasn't budgeted. We have to offset that expenditure some other place and make some recommendations to council so that we have an independent set of eyes
looking at this. I would contend that it should be 5 people, 5 citizens, okay? And that their recommendations come to the council, if needed monthly, but very probably on a quarterly basis, to work with the city staff, giving a second set of eyes to this. And that process, okay, I think would be beneficial not only to the council, but also to city staff. You know, that they could, instead of making big presentations to the council where you don't have a tremendous amount of time, okay, we could do it with a small committee. And furthermore, this committee could take charge of the zero-based budgeting process. Really needs to begin now. If we're going to have a new budget or a new multi-year budget by July, August timeframe to present to council. You know, although how legal fees and that kind of stuff are done, and what permitting fees need to be done, I think that's a little bit off the topic of monitoring, which was what the issue was that the auditor brought up. And I believe the recommendation of this committee should focus on process to eliminate these types of problems in the future, be it legal and professional fees, or be it entertainment fees, or be it employee costs, that we're looking at that across the board.
Per charter, would it be recommended that it be city citizens of Floresville, or would it be, you know, some of our extended committees, that they'd be extended out into the county?
It's a good question. I think there's 2 points to make on it. One, the city charter does allow the council to create additional boards and committees as needed. 2, the precedent as far as who serves on these boards has been satisfied both by precedent and by state law as it relates to the 4A and 4B boards, where the state law extended eligibility from, besides those that live in the jurisdiction of the city, to the state, and the city chose to say you must live within the county. That has been the case with the 4A and the 4B boards. In the case of this committee, the Parks Foundation, potentially the ordinance committee that has been created, we have looked for people who are willing and capable and have the skills. And sometimes that means going into the ETJ or even into the county to those people. In speaking with someone today, he recommended that I contact a gentleman who lives in Bentwood, who's a retired CPA, who spent most of his career working with municipalities, that he would be a great resource for this committee. But it certainly would be up to the council to appoint the committee. I don't think it would be this committee's responsibility to say who should serve on that committee or what their credentials should be, but rather what should the function of that committee be, and then allow the council to appoint.
Now, this committee would be working side by side with, say, with Laura or Andy, or, you know.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And they would be volunteer.
I'm sorry.
They'd be volunteer.
One of the points I want to make sure that it's understood, when the statement was made that we needed a second set of eyes to monitor, that's when Laura's position was created. Because that was the auditor's recommendation. We had Fonda as the only one that was handling paying the bills, reconciling books, and they said we need a second set of eyes, and that's when Laura's position was created. And it is correct that the council has the authority to appoint as many committees as they want to, boards or committees, as they see fit.
I think that before we jump on the bandwagon and create one more committee, we ought to allow the city staff to work per their recommendations regarding hiring the comptroller to do just what Andy suggested, rather
No.
than appointing another committee. That's my recommendation, is not to, at this time, let the city work and monitor, just as,
Now is, you know, I know Laura's not here, but is her plate too full to, you know, to help, you know, this committee, or to even bring up any recommendations, or will it be more beneficial for her to have this committee set up to where it would actually alleviate some of her work, her tasks, her duties?
That would be something that we would have to ask her specifically, and what were you gonna say?
My opinion on this, I don't see a committee or a group of people coming in and looking at it, I don't see it as a negative thing. Unfortunately, we're playing catch-up so much right now that having to have additional meetings and having to explain additional things, I think municipal government is gonna be a huge importance in that, because a regular set of books and municipal books are not the same. They're not done the same. I mean, yes, you add the same, you look at the same funds that Griffin, restricted information, hotel motel tax and how that works and those kinds of things. If you're starting over with a group of people that do not understand it, the set of questions that you're gonna be answering is gonna take up more time than it's gonna be beneficial for them being there. Do I think it's a great idea? At some point, absolutely. Unfortunately, at the time that we are right now, we are in catch-up mode. And it's taking us a lot to get where we need to be. And again, Laura would be the best person to answer that question. From my perspective, I obviously will more than likely be part of the committee as well. And I think with everything that Laura's trying to get in place and get moving forward to start getting ahead, having to do all of these explanations once again is gonna be a step back. I don't believe that it's a negative thing. I think that it will be a positive thing once the time is right for it. That's personally my opinion. No.
I think in the shambles that the city is in right now, I don't think there will be a perfect, or
No,
even
and I agree.
anything, you know, perfect time for a committee like this to come in. I would like to hear, you know, what her
I would too.
what her opinion would be, you know, being that she'd be or between her and Fonda.
I
Well,
think
not to
in
be
the
a
spirit.
thorn in the side of progress, but since you mentioned precedents, the council has already established a precedence that there's gonna be a review. I don't know Mr. Johnston's contract of employment for the city and his responsibilities, nor do I know Laura. But I would think that you're gonna review over the next 90 days the performance of the city staff under his tutelage. You already have a review council of 5 members and a mayor that's gonna look at it. To me, adding another group to oversee, you're taking away the autonomy, the authority that you've given those people to run their budget. If they're not doing it correctly, it ought to be able to come up. If you're gonna see it on a monthly basis, the 5 council members and the mayor are already a sitting council. So why not do it like you've already got it set up? You're gonna do 90 days worth of evaluation, look to see what they've got. If it continues in the red, then step in and let the city council hold the hammer or the sword of Damocles over the city staff to do their darn job.
I think, and whenever the time is right, in the spirit of transparency, that I like that idea of creating a board to watch, to help, to be a part of the community. And as far as having to educate them all, you get educated people already that weren't just
And then that's what I
dollars.
said, that would be, no, and I have no, that was kind of my thing, is the municipal history on it. You know, if you understand what the uses of hotel motel tax are and you look at a budget, it's much easier to see where some of those things happen. And it's, you know, I mean, it's something that can be done, there's definitely no doubt about that. We just need to decide whether this moment in time is the correct time, or 90 days from now, or, you know, however we want to look at it.
Well, I want to bring us back to our focus. What the committee was a thought, whether it is appropriate now or appropriate or not, or what the function of that committee would be, is certainly up to this group to discuss. And the recommendations that we have to come to, okay, in response to this audit.
Well, how often are the budget workshops
Well-
scheduled?
Hold the thought. We'll get to budget. But let's stay focused on monitoring, which is the biggest finding in not only the upcoming audit, but the previous audit. So this was an issue that was an issue in 2011, and the issue still remains uncorrected in 2012. Okay, or the effects of the issue, the effects of seemingly unresolved issues are still there. What recommendations do we make, if any, to address that?
Well, one of the issues is, and we'll go back to the monitoring issue portion of it, because if we're gonna evaluate the whole audit, and this was a, as I stated in my report, this was a, let me get to it real quick. It was a preliminary audit finding, and the first thing stated on there was that the books and records kept by the city have substantially improved since 2011. And I know that the council, the new council seated, has stated that they want a monthly report. They want a quarterly budget amendment done, and those processes are in place now, so we have to give it some time to get to the council and make sure that all council members are involved in receiving the report by our comptroller, so.
As Mr. Jones suggested, we already have a council whose responsibility is to monitor. And now that we're going to be seeing it on a monthly basis, I think that makes a lot more sense. But to create a committee for another committee, I mean, I think we can hold off on that.
Well, I would argue 2 points here. One, it was not this council that mandated monthly financial reports and quarterly budget amendments. That occurred in October of 2012, specifically October 4th of 2012, which is before the seating of this new council. Secondly, I would argue that be it a committee or some procedural change needs to be in place, in that because of the monitoring or lack thereof, the deficit increased 213%. So obviously the processes that were put in place as a result of the last audit did not address this issue or correct this issue.
Excuse me. Did we not say that the second meeting of the month would be for strictly financial reporting?
Yes.
Okay.
Was not the city manager's contract augmented on October 4th by the previous council, to which you set, Councilwoman Castillo, that put the requirement of monthly financial reports and quarterly budget amendments on his job description?
Well, obviously, yes.
Okay, here we sit in the beginning of February, okay, and are dealing with an audit that has seen further deterioration as a result of monitoring, be it good or bad, okay, and need to be able to respond to the auditor to say, what changes are we putting in place to ensure that this does not occur again? Our response on the previous audit was, quote, Monthly review of actual versus budget amounts is being implemented. This was in early 2012 when it was presented to the council. Here we are in early 2013. Can we simply respond by saying we're gonna do things just like we said we were?
But the auditor is aware, and in my statement, it is stated in there that they're aware of the year that we had in regards to legal and professional fees, and that's why their staff's recommendation was to limit those to budget. The monitoring and the monitoring reports were done and presented to council. Now, the legal fees and the professional fees continued even after that. So the argument is.
What adjustments?
I thought we weren't gonna interrupt.
Excuse me.
The argument is on our end, and that's why the recommendation was made, if we limit our legal fees to the budgeted amount and our professional fees to the budgeted amount, then we are addressing that portion of the monitoring, which was the overage that led to further deterioration.
Okay.
And
If
I
those
think
two
we
factors,
also-
I'm sorry, if those two factors are the factors that have led us to where we are today, then we know that that's what has to be done. Monitoring or not monitoring, we have to limit those to specific areas of expenditure.
Well, I would argue then, if we focus on legal and professional fees, how do we deal with entertainer fees and $40,000 over budget already with the event center? How do we deal with many of these items that are currently over budget unless we have a process that says, if you approve, if the council approves $100,000 for legal fees, or for $100,000 for coffee pots in city offices, and at 3 months through the fiscal year, it appears that we're gonna spend $120,000 on coffee pots in city offices. What process do we have today, or what process can we implement to ensure that that $20,000 for excess coffee pots can be taken from another budget line item, say, it appears we're not gonna need to spend $40,000 on uniforms, we only appear to be spending $10,000. So we take that other $20,000 and we move it over here, so that at the end of the year, the revenue and the expenses balance out, which is what did not happen, be it legal and professional fees, or be it entertainer fees, or be it coffee pots, okay? That we did not finish the year where the budget revenue equaled expenses, okay? What processes are in place to ensure that that does not happen again? Now, that is the focus of monitoring. The focus of legal and professional fees is treating a symptom of the disease, putting a Band-Aid on. Okay, is it a process that probably the council should address? Absolutely. But the monitoring process, or the procedure process to ensure that we don't go at the end of the year $150,000 over, or in this case $355,000 over what was budgeted, over what we had revenue for.
That's
Mr. Miller,
why, I'm sorry.
as we have said many times over, it was the unexpected that caused us to be over. Illegal and professional fees, and I can't repeat that often enough to make it clear to you that that's what caused that problem.
So correct me if I'm wrong,
So
Councilwoman Castillo.
the unexpected, how do we know? We don't have a crystal ball of what's gonna happen or what other lawsuits are coming your
Understandable, but
way.
you have a budget for that, and you try not to exceed that, at all terms.
So if we have a lawsuit, we're not gonna address it.
If we don't have
If
the
we don't
money,
have the money, we're not gonna address a lawsuit.
It depends what type of lawsuit it is, if TML can interject with that or not.
But again, it's unforeseen, we don't know. We
One of
don't-
the,
Excuse me.
One of the action items that was presented by the city is 3, says that the city will have to build a 3-month reserve to ensure uninterrupted city services in case of unforeseen circumstances. So
Which is a
to
plan.
getting there, getting the money
Mhm.
is one thing, but they've suggested how they're gonna get there by getting the reserves back.
sure, if I can add,
Before you go on,
Yes, sir.
please let me address this. The legal fees, just from Mr. Rosenberg, through September 30th of 2012, were known. They weren't surprises, okay? They were known to city staff, and they were known to the previous council. This same council, knowing that they had this unexpected overage in legal fees, approved a budget that was $155,000 more than revenue that the city collected, pulling in revenues from water and sewer and refuse to the tune of some $600,000. It was this same council that knew what the unexpected legal fees were, approved the raise for the city manager. It was this same council that knew what quote-unquote the unexpected was, that approved the collective bargaining agreement for the police department that cost the city some $79,000 plus. It was this same council who knew about these unexpected legal fees that approved the $40,000 in unbudgeted expense to the event center. Before we start throwing down targets of culpability, of responsibility, I suggest that we address the process so that future councils are not hampered by these kinds of numbers and these kinds of surprises.
Mr. Miller, we are here to solve the problem. We're all in the same boat. Rehashing what you've already rehashed over and over in previous meetings is not gonna help solve the problem. So I suggest that we listen to the city manager and find out how he plans to do that. Because I read his email presentation, and it makes a lot of sense. And I think we need to move forward instead of sitting here rehashing the same old, same old. So I suggest we move forward. Monitoring is good, and that's the reason we have Laura.
and one of the issues that, whether it was the previous council or this council, implemented, this council's the one that's gonna be receiving the monthly reports. How do we offset expenditures, over expenditures in some line items and less expenditures? That's a budget amendment. And that budget amendment will address those issues. One of the other issues that I know this council has put into place is they empowered a 4A board to say, you need to take a look at that center, and we need to look at what you can do to improve that, and how we're gonna increase revenues, and all of that stated in staff recommendations to allow that process to happen. And the expenditures and the overages and the issues that we're addressing were, from this audit, have been issues for longer than the time pointed out here. Now, we're having to address these issues. And because of that, our staff recommendations say 24 to 36 months to correct issues like that, because that's how long it takes. So those issues in the staff recommendations continue, and speaking with the auditors They understand the issues that we've got, and we're addressing every single one by evaluating permit fees, by evaluating water and sewer rates, by evaluating cost of services at the center, and all. When those things are put into place, then we'll start moving forward. The one issue that will assist us in the deficit portion of this audit is leaving those vacant positions. That is a now. How are you gonna start addressing that now? We're gonna leave those vacant positions, and as you can tell, $215,420 from this budget that we're cutting off on the general fund, and $124,653 on the water and sewer. That is a now. The other points that were made in the staff recommendation are a process that will be put in place, and that we'll start addressing those issues with time. But with time is the only way that we're gonna make it to where we are. Because with time is how we got in this situation. It wasn't last year, the year prior, as discussed. It's been many years that issues hadn't been addressed. And you as a committee, and you council members that are here, are starting to do that. And it's gonna be a tedious process. And you are correct. If we continue to take steps back to point blame, we're never gonna address what we need to address.
I think one of the things that's been mentioned, but I don't think that the point has truly been made, that one of the things that were utilized to correct some of the issues that were in the audit that came out in 2011 was the comptroller position was created. That was that second set of eyes that was required to be there. Laura has not been with us the entire year of the budget for 2012 either. She hasn't had a full year of monitoring the second set of eyes, the second person looking at it, the stipulations that are put there. That was a created position. That's not something that's ever been here before. She's now been here, 4 months? Going on 5 months now? And she's working on those processes, doing the monthly reports. We've received 2 monthly reports from her at this point. She's pointed out some of the things that are coming up. She keeps, it's a weekly meeting that happens, or more so here, but some of the issues that are being mentioned that have not been addressed have been addressed. Unfortunately, it's not something that overnight you're going to be able to see, although a lot has happened. The reports are coming in, she's handling them at city council, the reports look differently, there's more information there, she's in the process of making those changes. So I think it needs to be noted that the things that were noted in the audit as being incorrect are in the process or have been corrected. I think it needs to be addressed, that it wasn't just put out there, nothing has been done about it, because that is absolutely not true. And that position is a huge point to the monitoring part. However, in the 5 months that she's been here, she's trying to get everything put in place. Do I agree that, it needs to continue to be monitored by the mayor and the city council? Absolutely, and that's what the second meeting is. We haven't necessarily seen even all of the reports and all of the findings that she can bring to you in those meetings and at those reports. And I think that it's kind of being looked over. Well, the position was created, the monitoring is there. That was the main part of what was required to help to make that monitoring situation better. Do you agree with that? I mean, is that not what that was created for? That position? I mean, that's my understanding of it, and I need to make sure that that's very clearly made. Big steps have been made to help with monitoring. And they're starting to come to fruition with the reports and with the things that are coming up.
As a matter of fact, and I agree with everything you said, Sherry, but I wanted to point out that immediately, by cutting back 7 positions, the 5 positions that, for a savings of $215,420, and the 2 positions in the water sewer, is $124,653. That brings us to a total of $340,073. That's an immediate savings. The other thing I saw in your report, Andy, was the affluent water sale. The potential for a savings is great, up to $300,000. Now, is that annual, or are we?
Yes,
is
and
that over several years?
The revenue generation would be estimated that in approximately a year.
Okay, the other one is a sludge disposal fee for $138,000. That's another substantial savings. So I think we need to concentrate on the savings, and there were several other things that you mentioned, like the salary freeze. I'm not sure that I would go that far, but if the employees wouldn't mind that, I mean, that's, because there are certain things like the insurance, the salary freeze, those things that are hurting the employees. And if we're cutting back, you know, they're having to do more with less employees. So those things I would reconsider as far as recommendations.
I would take it another step into eliminate collective bargaining as well, to add that into the freeze. You know, because I think that's what kind of state we're in right now. Because, you know, especially trying to generate that 3 months of reserves, I think is very essential. And, you know, for whatever cuts and everything we can do. You know, not to hinder anything or to make things worse, but, you know, worst comes to worst. I mean, the employers are gonna have a lot more to worry about than 24, 36 months of freeze.
Yeah. And the other thing is the attorney fees. Budgeted $100,000 for legal and $75,000 for professional. If our current city attorneys can't work within that, we need to look elsewhere. And perhaps even entertain the idea of hiring an in-house attorney to do all of our legal work. And obviously the professionals, I mean, we couldn't do that, but at least it would work for the legal.
Have we already looked into that?
That's a possibility. That would have to be something that the council would direct, say we're gonna go out for RFQs, requests.
I guess my main question though would be, is it within means to do that if, you know, to say what type of contract Lou is under or any other type of legal representation?
I think,
Have a contract?
no, that I'm aware of. Can I come back to what this report that we received from the auditor and the function of this committee, specifically as it relates to monitoring? We've discussed this. Are there any motions for recommendations to the city council regarding changes in monitoring or no changes in monitoring?
I think, as a citizen, for transparency's sake, to get intelligent, experienced people that they don't have to be trained and they're not gonna babysit them, that, and we keep, and as a citizen, I keep feeling almost like I'm stupid, like, we're just gonna talk about the lawyer's fees, and we're gonna talk a little bit about the 4A. There's all these other departments that need to be monitored, you know, and it can be helpful, like that CPI, I think I know who you're talking about. Man, he is just wonderful. No, he has no extra grind, no nothing. But to have that in the spirit of transparency, to do this.
So your recommendation is a
Is
committee?
is a committee of citizens that are intelligent, mature, with experience. Yes, hand cherry pick.
Well, I object to the committee now, because I think that we need to let the current process work. We've got 5 city council folks and a mayor. We'll get quarterly reports, we'll get monthly reports, and we have a professional as a comptroller. So I think we're spending a lot of money with a comptroller, and as a matter of fact, if I recall correctly, we were going to hire an HR person, and she was replaced for the HR position, right, Andy?
That's correct.
So I think we need to allow that process to work before we make a recommendation. You know, I agree that we need savvy people, but I don't think that we need to throw this process out and put in a new one.
Well, my opinion is it's been in this process for the last 4 years, and this is the step.
I don't think so.
We never had a
That- it's
conversation.
just my
We never had a
opinion. I'm not
contractor.
asking you to agree with me.
No,
It's
but
my
the
opinion.
explanation to that would be.
Well, it may be a silly question, but I'm gonna ask it. Are we in the black or are we in the red today in the general fund? If you have processes in place, as I'm being told, then if we're in the red, those processes aren't working. If we're in the black, the general fund today, those processes are working. So are we in the red or are we in the black?
That's a financial question for Laura, and that's something that goes on month by month because we receive our sales tax and our property tax monthly. I can tell you that if you look at the books right now, there is money in the bank account and we are in the black. But that's an issue that has to be addressed completely for the entire year to see where we're gonna address the deficit of this past year, because that's how we ended up, the past year was in a deficit, so. I agree,
If we're in the black, I mean, wouldn't that mean that the deficit from last year has already been taken care of? Or is it still in the process of being worked on?
ultimately, at the end of this fiscal year, we'll see where we're at. But what happens is, what's that?
It's too late.
No, that's how way the fiscal, you close that deal. And one of the things that I wanted to make sure that we understand, or that we address is on the auditor's findings, preliminary findings, where it states the general fund has a deficit of $384,661 and payables of $177,468. Everything's been paid. What we're doing is we're paying last year's stuff out of this year. So that's what happens. And every month changes, and that's one of the things that she was concerned about. When we give a cash balance to the council, that fluctuates from month to month depending on where we are. Our process for this year is to leave those positions vacant, spend only on necessary funds to see where we in that year. The city has monies in restricted and unrestricted funds. The unrestricted funds are utilized to pay off this deficit so we can continue to operate. We're not broke, we don't not have cash in the bank, we do. But once we finish out the year, then we have to replenish those monies wherever we pull those from.
Based on current expenditures, based on current revenue flow, we're 3 months through this fiscal year, some projections can be made. Okay? We were $355,000 in the hole in 2012, and that carried forward. We had $155,000 general